Someone strange. A neighbor. Who you gonna call? The Lateral Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Lateral Show. Fasten your seatbelts, because here we go. Wham bam, Uncle Sam. It's another edition of the Lateral Show here on the Fantasy Six Pack YouTube network. If you're watching the video, or if you're just listening to the podcast, it just comes out through the Lateral Show channel. But that's too much information that you don't really need right now. But some information you do need is my name, which is Herms, on Twitter at Herms NFL. Joined as always by my good friend McLateral. How goes it?
What's up, people? Season's eats and greets, and we are officially in playoff season. It is here. The moment you have waited for since you made that first terrible draft pick all the way back in August, even earlier for you dynasty players. But no, I digress. It is playoff season. This is where it all matters. There is no next week if you can't get through this week. And we have some players that did not make it through last week that we are going to get to later in the episode.
Yeah, definitely one big notable one that kind of has a domino effect. So if you like what we did with the 49ers last week, you're going to love what we do with this team and their quarterback this week. And then we're going to keep the quarterback theme going with a little bit of a ambiguous veteran quarterback carousel, because there are some guys that are, doing pretty well that entered this season on the bubble. So we're going to put our hypothetical hats on and try and make some predictions as we move forward, even, just beyond the rest of this year, but even into next year. Who knows how much farther in the future? Who knows? It knows no bounds. But first, we must get on our soapboxes. And you did seem pretty enthusiastic about the thing that you wanted to get on your soapbox about, so I'm just going to hand it over to you first.
Enthusiastic is perhaps the wrong term. Enraged might be more accurate.
All right.
Because Jim Irsay is a coward. He had potentially earned my gratitude when he suggested that the NFL needed to vote out Dan Snyder. And as of today, he has walked back his comments saying he is not ready to vote out Dan Snyder because he is a coward, just like his father was when he moved the Baltimore Colts out of town in the middle of the night in a Mayflower shipping van all the way to Indianapolis. So congratulations, you're a schmuck.
That is outrageously disappointing.
It is.
Damn it. Oh, that carrot has been dangled in front of us for so long that not only is like the rotting process has already begun, but it's starting to attract way too many flies. I can't just get him out. Get Dan Snyder out already.
Yeah,
please.
I mean, we should have maybe, seen the warning signs when there was a chance an Irsay was going to make a group of people from Maryland happy, but alas, here we are.
Yeah. God, yeah, it's certainly disappointing. And then I'm going to keep on the theme of disappointing things, because I'll tell you, kind of picking up the baton from where you introduced things earlier about the playoffs. This is the first year in our home league since I joined the league that I missed the playoffs. And the worst part is, so I mean, like, obviously, there's the group chat we have on Facebook Messenger, doing whatever. And we're kind of talking about the things and the whatnot, and and for me, it's irritating because I know the one thing I did wrong that could have easily swung the pendulum in the other direction. So we've talked about our home league on this podcast many a time. And for those of you who don't know, you're going to care now because we're talking about it, and it's my soapbox, damn it. 2 keepers, no round penalty, just straight keeper, do whatever the hell you want. And here I was looking at my roster before you lock it in. I think it's like an hour before the ESPN room opens. You have to lock in those keepers. And I'm like, who needs Devontae Adams when I could have Kyle Pitts.
The best part is I'm the one who scared you into doing it partially. Because I literally told you, if you don't keep him, I'm going to draft him.
I'm not going to pretend like that didn't influence my decision somewhat, but it was still something, like, because it was tough. And I feel like for a lot of us in that league, outside of maybe a couple managers, like, there were about 3 or 4 players on our rosters that you could make a real case for. And I just made the worst decision because on top of like letting him go, like
the year before you let Jonathan Taylor go for Alvin Kamara.
Because I care too much about Alvin Kamara and I just let that blind me. Like, I'm shooting myself in the foot repeatedly with a semi-automatic weapon of my own ineptitude.
You're rewarding those guys that got you that Super Bowl ring, and the contracts are starting to hurt now.
That is exactly what it is. Like, I'm pretty good at this. Yeah. I have other leagues that are doing fine, doing the whatever, but in this league, some of my brains and logic go out the window because it's the home league. I want to do it a certain way with the guys that I've trusted, and it's just like, oh my god. So the streak is broken. I am a doofus, and I am now going to have to figure out what the hell I'm gonna do for next year because I'm looking at it now and I don't know who the hell I'm keeping around.
I know who I'm keeping. Same guys I kept last year. Justin Jefferson and Austin Eckler.
Yeah, that smart move down your. I mean, so yeah, you get to keep 2 of probably the top 3 to 5 picks in ADP this time next summer.
Best part is you traded
good on you.
Eckler.
That is to get Devontae Adams, who I then let go because I hate myself. But I have Jalen Hurts. I think I'll try and build around that. But
neither of my keepers are guys I drafted. You traded me Austin Eckler, and I picked Justin Jefferson up off of waivers.
That is true.
His rookie year. Yeah.
Look at that. There you go. So a peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, I'm in third. I'm feeling okay about things. I got a tough matchup against the 6th place team who now has Christian McCaffrey going full bore, but we'll see how things go. I think it'll be a pretty even matchup.
It's going to be fun to sit back and watch because now that my horse is out of the fight, I'll be able to just enjoy from a distance and see which one of you takes home the crown. That's going to be.
I will say,
be a good time.
My favorite one, or my most, I don't know if favorite's quite the right word, but I'm in this CBS league, and it's standard. And I've actually done pretty well because I've just made some good waiver moves. Like I picked Chris Olave off a waiver, Michael Pittman off a waiver, Jerry Jeudy off a waiver. It's very short bench and there's no flexes. So it's only 5 bench spots. You have to play 3 wide receivers, no flexes. So and it's some older guys too. But CBS does Yahoo, I think, does it to a little bit of degree, but CBS sends the emails where they do like the fake news reports on your team.
Yes.
They do the power rankings. And despite having the best team in the league basically all season, like wire to wire, I'm like in the bye, I'm the number 1 seed. I've got the most points scored of anyone in the league. And CBS Sports has the audacity to put me number 2 in the power rankings, which is 2 spots higher than number 4 where they had me last week when everything I just said was still true.
Do better, CBS. Come on.
Man. I don't know. Let's move on.
Yes, we've got plenty of show left to show. No, that's not the way. Not the point. We have a lot of things to discuss, but before we look ahead to some of the things we have on the docket for this program, we have to go over some of the things that we talked about last week with our guest Bo McBrayer of Fantasy Pros and the Big Time Flavor Company. Yeah. I almost messed it up.
Big flavor that he is.
he is a big flavor. It's like credit. It's an apt description. But yes, we will do the fastest recap in fantasy football podcasting before we put our feet forward into the whole quarterback theme of this week. So why don't you go ahead?
Well, let's start with quarterbacks again, because the first thing we focused on, my story of last week, was Can you play any San Francisco 49ers with Jimmy Garoppolo out? We were pretty sure, yeah, Christian McCaffrey, you could play. By the way, we were right. Brock Purdy, we said no. We were wrong.
He was pretty good.
QB8. He looked really good. Who knows if it was because Tampa looked bad, but regardless, he played well. Jordan Mason played decently well too, but he didn't produce much in PPR, which again, we kind of expected because again, we think he is good as a runner, but he catches no passes. PPR passing matters. Deebo Samuel went out with an injury, but was doing well until then. Brandon Ayuk actually probably looked better than he really was. He finished wide receiver 28 in PPR, but really capitalized on a touchdown. Didn't get a ton of production otherwise. George Kittle had a rough game finishing tight end 15, which we somewhat anticipated given his role in an offense where San Francisco has talented wide receivers. Now with Deebo out, he'll probably be more intriguing, and you were going to play him anyway, so it's irrelevant. Robbie Gould didn't have a great game, but that's because the Niners dismantled Bucks. He went 5 for 5 on extra points, did everything you could possibly ask of him. Then we played a little Would You Rather. We did Niners wide receivers or Nico Collins and Niners wide receivers or Corey Davis. We had Deebo above everyone. Deebo did well, except of course the injury. Then we had Nico and Ayuk, and then Davis, except for Herms, who had Davis higher. Deebo got injured, as I've mentioned. Nico was already out, so we really couldn't judge him. Ayuk, again, did better than expected. Had some concerning usage, only 3 targets. And Corey Davis was nowhere to be found at all. Moving on to our guest, Bo McBrayer, and his Week 14 storyline. Better than crappy tight ends. Bo and Herms like Chigoziem Okonkwo from the Tennessee Titans, formerly of the Maryland Terrapins. And I like Greg Dulcich from the Denver Broncos, possibly paired with some Tyler Conklin for some matchup-based plays. And that's it. That is a recap of everything we went through last week.
You love to see it, folks. You love to see it. One question to kind of just revisit because you had mentioned, like Deebo getting injured and stuff. Like, I'm curious, just generally, like this doesn't have to be like a super long answer, but just like how you think it might affect the offense, because like Deebo not being part of that is taking away a pretty key weapon to what they're going to try to do. So like, how we feel in vibe check post Deebo.
So here's how I am breaking it down in my head. Purdy will essentially stay the same usage. McCaffrey will probably get a little more passing work, a little less rushing work. Jordan Mason will, I think, get more rushing work, but probably still won't see any passing down work. Brandon Ayuk will have to get more than the 3 targets he saw last week. I expect him to be able to take some of that Deebo work in the downfield passing game. And then, expect Kittle to get a little more work over the middle of the field. So I think he's got top 12 potential for sure. So I think it's going to kind of rise all of the other boats in general that he's out, maybe sink Purdy's down a little. But the usage is probably the same, all things being equal. And again, McCaffrey, I think, will actually run a little bit less, but maybe take on a little more passing work.
So I guess in the aggregate,
I wouldn't change how you approach any of these guys other than I'd feel a little more secure in Ayuk and Kittle.
Yeah, because I was kind of thinking just based off of that, like weirdly, the potential winner of the outcome is Jordan Mason.
So, yes, the issue is he's still not going to get any passing down work. So then you have to count on him getting rushing touchdowns. And other than him breaking off a play, I don't know that he'll really get any designed rushing work.
I think, he's probably more of for you dynasty managers out there that are in your dynasty playoffs, because those rosters tend to be larger. Well, the starting lineups also.
I think in really deep leagues, he's a potential flex play. If you're doing a 0 RB build, he could possibly be your RB2. DFS lineups, he's certainly intriguing, especially against the Seattle Seahawks this week. And he does have a good matchup this week. I just ultimately, if he ends up disappointing, it'll just be down to the fact that he doesn't catch balls. And I don't think that's going to change.
And I think it's going to be interesting to see where, any sort of prop line could be on his rushing total. And if you find it and you want to gamble on it, you can go over to Thrive Fantasy and enter the promo code HERMS for a 100% match on your first deposit. So if you put down $10, boom, you get $20. If you put down $20, boom, you get $40, so on and so forth, up to $100. If you put down $101, they will not match it. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, but either way, promo code Herms on Thrive Fantasy. That is the promotional plug, and that is the end of that and the beginning of the same thing we did last week, but this time it's about Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals tearing his ACL. And it's, I made a comment in our Dynasty League chat, like those non-contacts, I hate seeing that, especially with, it's another example of not playing on real grass, some of the unfortunate, downsides that come with that, and that's a whole separate conversation. That
the conversation is we need to play on real grass.
Yeah. But like out in Arizona, they have to store it in the.
That's the conversation. You have to play on real grass, otherwise these guys are going to keep getting injured.
Yeah, I don't know how they're ever going to solve that, but thankfully neither of us are lawn engineers.
If only there were billionaires that own these teams that could afford to sink some money into maintaining real grass in a situation where it may take more time, effort, and money to do so.
But that's the thing. I think they do. Like they have that whole system where like they keep it housed and treated and then like wheel it in through that like little door thing. Like they actually have a pretty good system out there, and it's still not great. But either way, Kyler Murray tearing an ACL. So if he's on your redraft roster, I think you can pretty safely go ahead and drop him because he's not coming back.
I think like you could potentially, if you're in a keeper league, you could throw him on IR and just, think about it. But I got to be honest, like there's a real chance we're not going to see him until the middle of next season.
Yeah, because it's week 14 and the timing of the injury sucks. Oh my god. Okay. Yeah.
Like he very easily could not be ready week 1 of the NFL season. And he certainly could lack the mobility that makes him a viable fantasy quarterback.
Because he always starts off hot. The Cardinals always start off hot, and then it just always
for him
tails
to start off hot with his knee barely healed.
So just quick off the dome. Does he make your top 12 in your rankings for next? I mean, well, obviously, if you miss his time, no. But like,
so let's say, I think there are a couple options.
Yeah.
As we've seen with guys like Odell Beckham, he could be, ready as late as like a year down the line. Jameson Williams ready almost a year down the line, but we've seen with other guys, they're ready closer to 9 months. So if it's 9 months, that's probably around week 1 of the NFL season with basically no preseason work, right?
Yeah.
That checks out. So if he's ready at that moment to play week 1, I'll probably have him around QB 12 just because of the upside he can provide if in fact he is ready to go and just will be a little rusty, because then you get through it. It'll be tough to say that there are 12 quarterbacks better in terms of fantasy production than him. Top 8, probably not.
I feel that.
And then if he's not looking healthy by then, he could make it out of my top 12. Kind of get that coveted like 13 spot with the high upside guy that you're just like not sure if it'll work.
Yeah. And, kind of as you were, working through the beginning of that, like a bulb went off in the back of my head because I was thinking, when did our good pal Joe Burrow tear his ACL? That was week 11 that year. And like he found a way to, make it back and do the thing. But we remember, and now
Joe Burrow, you're not reliant on his legs though. That's exactly the issue.
And like, so like the difference between them obviously is, just the type of quarterback. But even then, we did see, now off the top of my head, I can't remember which leg this happened for Kyler anyway. Like, so if this is his plant leg, then we did see, even for Joe Burrow, that was a bit of a thing he had to work through.
I want to say it was right leg for Kyler.
Yeah, so that would be, so he's going to plant on that. And we saw what that did to Joe Burrow. Like, it took him about a month to really get that confidence back. And that's something that, like, all the fantasy doctor people who know way more about this shit than we do talked about. So, like, that's going to be a concern. And then the mobility. Yeah, I mean, he's probably not going to be in my top 12 either. I mean, like even coming into this year, I was skeptical about it for some of the reasons we outlined before. You know, the start hot, the finish cold, and then with this, it's just I don't know,
He'll
man.
probably be either my QB 12 or my QB 13.
Yeah, I can get behind that tentatively, but then you know that's the future with him. But there's still the present with the rest of everybody else we have to work through. So,
well, and let me say the other thing with the ACL that's interesting
yeah.
looking forward is I think this has either saved or ended Cliff Kingsbury's job. And, you know, the GM in Arizona just took a leave of absence indefinitely today.
Yeah.
Which I think was for personal reasons, as in not a football decision.
I have very little information about it,
Yeah.
but like that, yeah, they're keeping it close to the vest, but I don't think they necessarily implied it's anything.
I haven't gotten the impression
Yeah.
it was like, you are bad at this. We would like you to leave. I think
Yeah.
it's like he either needs to take a break or he did something wrong on the personal. But again, like I don't remember the reporting off the top of my head at this moment. But again, like there is to say there is no turmoil already in Arizona would be a lie. So then you got Cliff Kingsbury and like Kyler Murray, either with the ACL tear, Cliff can go, well, my quarterback tore his ACL. We had no chance to try and mount a comeback or anything like that. You know, if he doesn't get injured in that game, maybe we're 5-8. And then, you know, could have gone the rest of the way, could have been 9-8. That's a playoff team potentially. You can't fire me. And, you know, it's a possibility. On the other hand, they could just look at it and go, look, man, you're not going to be the one prepping Kyler for this season anyway, because Kyler's not going to be ready to go for the next season. So guess what? You're fired. We're going to bring in someone new. And that's that.
They backed themselves into quite the corner with the amount of money that they gave to all three of those individuals that we have just talked about.
Especially because they only had to give the money to Kyler. Kyler was the only one another team was going to take away.
Yeah, because I think like the Kingsbury experiment was already bold enough when he was brought into this situation in the first place.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know.
He was going to be an offensive coordinator. And then they hired him to be a head coach.
I have so many feelings about the ability for the air raid actually being possible at the NFL level, at least as far as the version of it that he wants to run true to the college style. And, you know, just like I've always had my doubts.
Weirdly enough, I think it could work if you appropriately focused on the defense, and he just never did because he's not a defensive coach.
Yeah. God, that team.
Like I think like if you had like tried to institute the air raid offense and then brought in like Wade Phillips as your defensive coordinator or something, like, you know, could have worked.
And it's funny because like they have
some defensive talent, but it's not schemed well.
Not at all. Because like if you have people like Isaiah Simmons and Budda Baker out there, like it really should be going a lot. But and up until this past year, obviously, because he left in free agency to sign with the Raiders, but like Chandler Jones was around for a long time. You bring in a JJ Watt, like good luck, Cardinals fans out there.
Yep.
You all have fun.
All right. Well, you want to have some fun with some current Cardinals players?
Let's go.
All right. Can you play any Arizona Cardinals with Kyler Murray out? Colt McCoy, no.
Superflex, honestly, he's not a terrible option. He is pretty competent running that system.
Looked pretty terrible last week. Maybe it was rust, but he looked bad.
He looked good before, though.
Yeah, like, but he looked bad last week when he was most recently playing as a quarterback.
I know.
And they just brought in another quarterback. Now, granted, likely just for depth. You know, Colt McCoy will be the starter next week.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I guess Superflex, sure, if you're desperate. But I'm not dying to play him. I will say, weirdly, like, their matchups aren't the worst. but I also don't love it for him next. So next week they got Denver. I do not like that for him.
Not a fan.
So, and especially since it's in Denver. So for other parts of the team, it's like, okay, sure. Like, later we're going to get to Matt Prater and the Cardinals DST. And it's like, Denver feels like a decent matchup for those two parts of the team. But the quarterback, I'm not so convinced. Buccaneers is a team that I feel should be able to handle the Cardinals, but after the Niners dismantled them, that could be a decent matchup. The Falcons aren't anything special. So the Cardinals weirdly have a decent run of games ahead of them.
Yeah. And
that they could take advantage of.
That's also why I said, so we agree, like single QB people out there.
God.
The McCoy thing doesn't matter.
I'd rather play Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
And I think that's honestly what it comes down to. Like, even in Superflex, I'd rather play Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy has looked better in what's now 7.5 quarters of football.
Something like that, yeah.
Than like Colt McCoy has looked this year, in 4 quarters of football. Like, noticeably so.
Well, McCoy has played a couple of games prior to this last one where he looked bad filling in.
I know, but
good.
I didn't
like.
He was fine in those games.
Yeah. But
his stat line this season is not impressive.
Yeah. And we're also talking about a range of quarterback where it's kind of just pick your own awful thing that you don't really want anyway. So,
my thing is like, are we sure Brock Purdy's so awful? Like, I'm not expecting him to be the second coming of Tom Brady or anything, even if he did just beat Tom Brady. Yeah. But like, if I'm comparing him against Colt McCoy, I might actually be able to compare him against Colt McCoy at this point, who has looked mediocre, who has played in 3 games. He's started 2. He's thrown a combined 1 touchdown. Brock Purdy threw 3 touchdowns last week. Like, I'm just saying, like, if I'm going to take my chances on someone, he would be, I think, the guy I'd rather take the chance on Colt McCoy.
If I'm taking a chance on anybody, I'm taking a chance on Jeff Driscoll of the Houston. No, I had to work that in there. It's interesting.
I will say, did you hear the thing on the footballers where they talked about his tight end eligibility at Yahoo?
I did not, but I have seen that kind of floating around. Yeah. Also, just like
that, if you want to take Jeff Driscoll in that situation, by all means. Otherwise, stay away.
I saw a tweet from the homie at Lindellians on Twitter, I believe, and it was just something to the effect of like, I want Taysom Hill, and then it's just, Mom, we have Taysom Hill at home, and then it's just a picture of Jeff Driscoll.
There you go.
And I'm like, oh, I had to work that. I had to work that in there. But yeah, I mean, it's the quarterback thing is. Pick your poison. I am obviously going to say Kenny Pickett is better than all of them because, again, obligatory me talking about Kenny Pickett moment. But generally,
Kenny Pickett might miss next week.
I know, it makes me sad. And I swear to God, if we get Mason Rudolph, but I will stop myself. But in essence, what we're saying is, Colt McCoy, you should hopefully be able to avoid having to consider it.
Yeah, I'm actually going to say
you probably should.
Single QB, no. Superflex is also a no for me. Like, it's just, it would depend on what else is out there on your waivers. But I think you would need to be like choosing between him and Mitch Trubisky or him and Davis Mills. Like, we're talking about that level.
I think a lot of people are going to be in that situation, but like, so basically, okay, here's the middle ground that we definitely agree on. If you are fucked and you are really at that point, because I know a lot of you out there are. You're doing it and you don't feel good.
And just remember, in Superflex, you don't have to play a second quarterback.
Also,
you may want to consider not doing that if Colt McCoy is your best option. So I'm sticking with my nope. Yeah. Just like I'm sticking with my yep for James Conner. Feeling pretty good about that one. Roll him out. Let's go. He looked like the running back I thought he was going to look like all season.
I've got my t-shirt for that wing place that I like to go to whenever I visit Erie, Pennsylvania on. right now. Shout out James Conner. Shout out Erie, Pennsylvania. You're never going to hear me say a bad thing about the guy. So 100%, he should win the league MVP every year because I love him. Moving on.
I mean, if MVP voting was based on performance last week, he'd be in contention. He was RB5 in PPR. He looked like the guy we hoped he would be all offseason long. And, I see no reason for that to change barring injury, which is why go.
Yo, it reminded me in a league that I got invited to this year, the fab budget. That's how we approached the whole thing. And Connor got dropped. And I was like, because I get he missed some time. It was a little annoying. And it took him, a little bit to work his way back up. But I saw he was out there and I was just like, you guys are batshit insane. So I emptied the entire clip on James Conner and I overbid by $40. And people were just like, what the hell are you doing? And I'm like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
And, so I feel vindicated with how good he's been lately because I had the faith. It's yes, okay, injuries is just a risk you run with him. But when he's running on full steam, this dude's incredible and they gave him all the opportunity in the world. So not only am I making the playoffs in that league, I think I have a pretty good chance, fingers crossed, for Lamar Jackson's health because I really need him. My second quarterback was Mariota for a while, so I'm struggling.
He's not going to be in your starting lineup because he's not going to be in the Falcons starting lineup.
Nope, and we'll talk a little bit about him later, unfortunately, which I really don't want to, but it fits the theme and we kind of have to. But
I don't think we'll have to talk about him long. Just like I don't think we'll have to talk about Keontae Ingram / Corey Clement question mark. Only if Connor's out, and then it's a debate between the two, and I lean Ingram, and I'm probably not feeling great about it.
We have seen one instance of Ingram, and we have only seen a handful of Clement in the past. But if we were to put them, together to organize their best performances on a list, Ingram's lone performance we've seen him in was better than anything we've ever seen from Clement in the past. And he's younger, and I kind of liked him coming out as a prospect.
And he's already been in the system. He's familiar with the team. And he got rushing work and passing work, not much of either for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Corey Clement just happened to outproduce him because he had one play that was longer.
Yeah.
But he never even got a rushing down. So, for me, I lean Ingram in that instance, but we're not playing either of them unless Connor gets injured.
Yeah, these are honestly dynasty stashes, because even in a deep redraft league, I feel like you can manage your bench better for redraft than worrying. Oh, actually, man, I'm
you'd have to be pretty deep to be stashing a handcuff like Ingram.
Yeah, so that.
Yeah. And if you're in a league that deep, you know who you are. DeAndre Hopkins, still feeling pretty good about it, I think. He's clearly the number one receiver on this team still. Especially, I think, with Murray being out, because Murray particularly has the connection with Marquise Brown. And DeAndre Hopkins was fine, even with Colt McCoy having a mediocre at best game.
That he was, and it immediately reminded me of something I had to look up, because it actually kind of reminded. Speaking of our home league that we were talking about earlier, I remember it was my first year in the league. You unfortunately had to deal with the brutal consequences of the Osweiler year.
Yes, I did.
But even in that circumstance, the dude was pretty good. He ended that year. So here we go. 78 receptions, almost 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns or whatever. So it's just we've seen Hopkins throughout the course of his career do some shit with less than stellar quarterback play. I bring it up just to kind of remind people of the fact that there has been a world in the past where this has been a concern, but he's largely been fine at worst. And you will settle for fine when it comes to a drop-off from starting quarterback to backup quarterback on a degree like this level of drop-off. So he's the one. He and Connor are just they're fine. I not really worried about that. It's some of the other ones we're going to talk about that I'm a little.
So I'm worried about Marquise Brown. I think you're probably playing him unless you have better options. He still saw 8 targets, which is not nothing.
Yeah.
But it didn't look pretty. And again, McCoy doesn't have that same connection with him that Murray does. And this offense is sputtering. Now, maybe Brown is still like getting rid of some of the rust from his injury. It's entirely possible. But given the fact that he was targeted 8 times in this game and that his snap count was pretty high, it was actually 96%. It was higher than any of the other wide receivers. He was the highest guy not on the offensive line or the quarterback. And again, only 8 targets in comparison to the 11 that Hopkins saw. Maybe with the Denver secondary, they really focus on Hopkins and it opens up Brown a little bit. But kind of want to play a little would you rather here.
I love this game.
Last week. Would you rather play Marquise Brown or Deontay Johnson next week? Well, this week that we're in, week 15.
No, I regret that I just made a grimacing face and weird noise because I just remembered, as much as I hate Mason Rudolph, that rookie year for Deontay Johnson, I mean, like, they actually played together a lot. That might actually be something that could be interesting to get him back on track, but I'm getting my brain off track now. But oh God, I hate both of these options, but probably Marquise Brown, just because, like, at least here's the one thing we know about Marquise Brown that is not true about Deontay Johnson. When Marquise Brown catches the ball, he is not immediately terrified that he is going to get tackled and dropped to the ground, which is something that I have not particularly enjoyed watching Steelers games this year. So, you probably go with, I mean, like, no, they both receive a shit ton of targets.
Well, so Deontay Johnson last week with Mitchell Trubisky throwing the ball saw 8 targets, caught 6 of them, 82 yards, no touchdowns. By comparison, Marquise Brown was 4 catches on 8 targets for only 34 yards. Now, Denver just got lit up by the Chiefs. Now, granted, neither Colt McCoy or Mitchell Trubisky / Mason Rudolph or Patrick Mahomes, but it does show that the defense can be a little exploitable, though I would say by comparison, Russell Wilson and Brett Rippon kind of lit up the Chiefs. And that's who the Steelers get next week. Well, this week, rather. So I kind of lean Deontay Johnson.
I have spent too much of my life defending Deontay Johnson. I can't do it anymore. I'm exhausted. You pick your poison. I mean, they're both in shit situations. I mean, like, there's another Cardinals receiver I'm a little bit more. Now, before I go a little bit too, I'm not saying I'm more interested in this guy than Marquise Hollywood Brown.
I was about to say, because this was about to get very interesting.
But there's somebody I'm more intrigued by.
You're talking about Robbie Anderson?
Let's go! He finally arrived after doing nothing since being traded over from the Carolina Panthers. Robbie Anderson came to life. What was that? He caught all 4 of his targets, like 50 yards doing the thing. He looked okay. He looked okay.
I still point out only 4 targets, which is why I'm leaning you're not playing him. I mean, it sort of depends like what your flex or your wide receiver 4 situation is, with the like build of your league. But like, I've got Nico Collins in one league, and if he's healthy, I'm playing Nico Collins over Robbie Anderson.
Yeah. My interest in Robbie Anderson is purely for those of you out there in 14-team or deeper leagues.
Okay.
If you are playing anything shallower than that, disregard everything about him.
But yeah, he did clearly look like the third option, or at least the third receiver in that Cardinals offense. And I think, unfortunately, it's Greg dead as a Dortch nail, because Rondale Moore gone, but like Dortch did nothing, literally.
Yet.
And even AJ Green got some work somehow. So I just, it really does feel like the 3 receivers of note are going to be Hopkins, Brown, and Anderson, of which you're really only feeling good about Hopkins.
Yeah. I will say, though, I am going to I am gonna hype up Dortch a bit just because, like, admittedly, that game was insane. I don't know how much we can really do. Like, it's worth putting a major caveat on anything that we can take away from that game specifically. But like, look, I am a loud and proud Dortch guy. The human Dortch was denied a bank loan against the Patriots, but he may not be denied a bank loan moving forward. We've seen it. The dude's good.
We have seen him take over that slot role. It will be interesting to see if he can mount a comeback again. I'm not so confident at this point. 5% of the snaps in a game where he was definitely going to be suiting up because he got 31% of the special team snaps. Like, they like him for special teams.
That they do.
In theory, he would have been available to be next man up. And next man up was, oddly enough, AJ Green in terms of snap share. But Robbie Anderson in terms of targets, though, both of them were out-snapped and out-targeted by this next guy, tight end Trey McBride.
Here we go.
I think there are better options, but I'm not sure there are better options.
I think we kind of just have to go with the sentiment that we closed our last episode with and just resign to the fact the tight end landscape blows. And we're kind of just chasing things that seem good that could be fine.
He got
could be fine.
He got a healthy snap share. He got 73% of the offensive snaps. He got a healthy target share. He got 6 targets. Now, granted, ended up being 41 total passing attempts, so not the largest target share, but considering it was the fourth most targets on the team behind Connor, in addition to Hopkins and Brown, it's decent. But at the end, it's 3 receptions for 28 yards and no touchdowns. So points-wise, it's 5.8 points.
But that's what I'm thinking. If you are looking for anywhere between 5 to 7-ish points, like as we discussed with Bo, honestly, at this point, with some of the bullshit we've been dealing with, that might not be bad.
So then let's play a little would you rather. Would you rather play Trey McBride or the sweet, almost dulcet tones of Greg Dulcich?
Well, I mean, in that situation, I'm going to prefer Greg Dulcich.
I just want to again, this is a guy who saw a decent snap share, decent amount of targets,
and we've already trusted him this year for reasons.
Dulcich has been good, genuinely good, and I think is still fairly widely available on waivers. I'll go check the notes here real quick as we vamp. Chigozie Okonkwo is another option.
Bro, 100%. Let's go. Chigokonkwo, my boy.
Chigokonkwo is available in 96% of ESPN leagues.
Which is bullshit. What is wrong with you people?
85% of Yahoo leagues. He's actually higher rostered in FanDuel than ESPN. And then what we got? Dulcich was the other one. Dulcich actually pretty highly rostered at this point. No longer a heat check candidate. He's rostered in about 60% of Yahoo and ESPN leagues.
That takes him out of the running.
That takes him out of the runnings. But so Chigokonkwo, you would prefer still to Trey McBride then, correct?
Let's go, baby. Maryland. Ooh, yeah.
Trying to think of who else, because I think he hasn't dropped enough.
Would you rather
have been disappointed in Dawson Knox? So I wanted to take a look, but it seems like as disappointed as people are, nobody's had the stones to send him packing.
Would you rather play the dumb Jeff Driscoll gadget game or Trey McBride?
I'd rather play Jeff. Honestly, so I'm in this standard league on CBS. My tight end is Taysom Hills because it's dude, in standard, touchdowns are what matter. So I'm going to play the guy who has the most likelihood of scoring a touchdown. And I don't care what type of touchdown that is. So Jeff Driscoll is more likely to score a touchdown than Trey McBride. So I'd rather play him.
There you go. The dump truck Jeff Driscoll coming in relevant in week 15 of the 2022 season, as we all predicted.
All right, here's an interesting one.
Okay, all right.
hauled in 4 passes, just 28 yards. So very comparable, I think, to McBride, and finished just ahead of McBride in PPR. K. Dotton. Who would you rather play, K. Dotton or McBride? I think I'd rather play McBride.
That entirely comes down to the health of Cameron Brate, because Otten's really only good when Cameron Brate's not healthy.
Right.
But he is perpetually listed as questionable and does not always play. So it actually is,
But he did play last week, and it was just enough, I think, to like bring things down for Otten a bit. Like if he doesn't play, Otten potentially has 6 targets, catches them all. Again, the yardage not so high, and they still got boat raced by the Niners, but Yeah. Okay. So I feel like we've covered McBride a decent amount enough. Want to get into the fun stuff? Matt Prater, what we think?
Sure.
I actually think probably not. But Denver could be a good opportunity. So the issue is like this is an offense that should slow up because it's being run by Colt McCoy.
Yeah.
Which tends to be good for kickers. On the other hand, the matchups are pretty favorable, which maybe isn't so good for kickers. I think, so for me, it's like probably not because he's about as good as anything else you could find there on the waiver wire. And for you, it's like, sure, because he's about as good as anything else you could find out there on the waiver wire.
And like, honestly, though, I mean, the likelihood of a Cardinals drive stalling out in field goal range is slightly higher without Kyler Murray.
Yes.
So, like, it helps Prater's case that it's Colt McCoy under center. But, like, we're talking about a level of kicker where, we're not really relying on... because obviously we're looking for, high-scoring offenses and offenses that are pretty good but routinely stall out. And then there's just the rest of the NFL teams, and the kicker output just is what it is, and you have to learn to live with it. Like...
Yeah, I guess my issue
you have better options than Matt Prater.
Yeah, and my issue with Prater is as he's getting up there in age, he's now 38, getting closer to 39 than not. He's attempted 1 field goal from 50 plus yards. Didn't make it.
He is not the same.
He's attempted 6 field goals from 40 plus yards. He missed 1 of them. So like in the 30-yard range, pretty good. And he made 2 30-ish yarders last week. He is not the same guy. And so that's why I'm just a little hesitant to like rely on him. I'd almost prefer someone like Robbie Gould in a more high-powered offense where I feel like the coach trusts him a little more. I'm not saying it's a massive difference, but like, even though Gould is also getting older and also not quite the same, Shanahan still trusts him and is willing to lose because of Robbie Gould. And that team still trusts him and is willing to lose because of Robbie Gould. And I just don't think I can say the same thing about the Cardinals.
Yeah. And then for me, I'm riding the Dicker the kicker train as long as it takes me.
Dude, I picked up Daniel Carlson in 1 league and I'm never letting go. Let's go.
Who let that man go?
Standard league, baby. It's a wild ride.
God damn.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Dude, ever since he came in the league, that guy
has been quite good.
One of the most underappreciated kickers in the entire NFL. That dude has a fucking leg, man. Like, dude, bro. Shout out Daniel Carlson. You take nothing else away from this.
Real quick, Cardinals DST. Again, I feel like probably not, but again, Denver weirdly feels like a decent matchup.
The Cardinals apply so much pressure just in terms of sending guys at a rate that is very high in the NFL, to the point where like it pays off in situations where the quarterback they're rushing is not particularly, skilled at stepping up in those critical moments. So if we do end up seeing Brett Rippon, which based on how the NFL is handling concussions,
sure looks like it
ever since the whole, Tua debacle, like I operate under the assumption at this point that if you have a concussion, you're not playing the next week. It's just like that's so.
Which I think next year could become, frankly, the rule rather than the norm.
Yeah. So like with Rippon out there doing the whole I'd feel okay about it, but it's risky as the Cardinals defense usually is. So I would caution against anything beyond this next
not
week.
loving them against Tampa, even if Tampa has looked a little weak.
Because Tampa's a wild card when it comes to
They
this
still
shit.
have Tom Brady. They're still incredibly talented across the offense. They just can't get it done.
It's either like they will either crush you, absolutely fall apart, or what has more commonly occurred, be decent enough to hang in, but it's hideous.
Yeah.
Which is still on the scale between good to bad, is like toward the middle of mediocre, but more toward the bad side.
Yeah, I just think for me, if you look at week 17, when they then get the Falcons, there's enough matchups where it's like Jacksonville plays Houston. I'd take Jacksonville against Houston over Arizona against Atlanta.
Well, I don't think Ritter's going to be very good, so I mean, I would.
Yeah, but that's a bit of a wild card. So it's like it's tough. I just don't want to be like reliant on it, I think, in the end. Kansas City.
By the time you're in the finals, it's just you and one other person. Okay, never mind. Yeah.
Kansas
you're not
City,
competing
if they're
against the rest of your
available, they
league.
will get Denver. Hopefully, like smart people have already stashed Kansas.
We covered
Denver
that
twice.
We covered that. They know. The lateral heads know.
Honestly, one that's intriguing: Detroit gets Chicago. Detroit's defense has kind of stepped it up recently. I don't hate them against the Bears. Compared to Arizona versus Atlanta.
I'll contemplate that.
That's why it's in. And for me, there's enough like interesting stuff out there where I'm like, I don't know.
Oh no, I mean, I would still rather play the Cardinals in that situation, but at least as far as just generally speaking, like the big thing I'm really waiting on when it comes to Chicago is the health of Khalil Herbert. Because if he actually ends up coming back into the fold, which is something I'm very excited about, which I mentioned in the waiver column, by the way, because some people forgot about this dude since he hasn't played since week 10. But let me remind you, as of this very moment, he still leads Bears running backs in rushing yards this season.
For me personally, it feels like there's no reason to bring him back, but I suppose they have to activate him off of IR at some point. So if he's activated off of IR, might as well play him. Like,
he's their best running back.
He is.
I don't care what anyone says. It's true.
Well, why don't we move on to some of the quarterbacks who, well, whether they're the best or not is questionable at best. You got some fringe quarterbacks you want to talk about.
Yeah, because, I mean, I think at this point, we're getting to the point, or at least for Dynasty players, I know I've been seeing the first initial trickling of the rookie content and the whatnot. So it's just like, all right, we got to start thinking ahead, finding some landing spots. And that does include some interesting quarterbacks coming out of college. The Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis, the whole Anthony Richardson thing, which okay. Well, I don't know how I feel. But regardless, like, these people are going to have to go somewhere. And there were a lot of quarterbacks that got opportunity this year that, did not have anything guaranteed beyond this year. Some of them have done better than others. The range of on a scale of Geno Smith to Marcus Mariota, I mean, there's a sliding scale within that. And that's kind of what I'm trying to, whether we rank them or not, I don't know, but we'll just run down the list. Like, my number one candidate of the thing that I feel safest about in terms of this guy is keeping his damn job is a name that I just mentioned, Geno Smith. Dude. Like, I feel pretty good about that whole thing. I've seen reports that there is mutual interest between the two parties to work out something like A+ report card for 2022 and Geno Smith of the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. He's certainly the one who's deserved to keep his job the most. I think his age just brings into question, like, will the Seahawks give him the deal he wants? But I think it will be accurate to say he will be a starting quarterback in the NFL next year. It just may not be in Seattle. But I would put Seattle as the front runner for what it's worth.
Yeah, and for those who, forgot or just haven't been keeping track for some reason. We are talking about the QB6 overall, and
Rode
in
him to the
fantasy,
number 3 seed in our home league. Like,
yeah,
he's been very good.
Yeah. And the QB7 in points per game with 18.9. So the fact that he's flirted with that 20 point that you really want out of your quarterback, like, dude, also serves us
Oddly
right.
enough, I hate him this week, but that's a separate issue.
Yeah. But, like, it also serves us right for being the whole, like, despite DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett being supremely talented receivers, we just assumed the absolute worst of Geno Smith, even though he was actually pretty good in relief of Russell Wilson last year. That's something I feel dumb about. I could have had more of both of those guys.
So I have to say, we assumed the worst of Geno Smith. I think we also assumed the worst of Pete Carroll. I think that plays a not insignificant part in it.
And
it
ties into our hype about Russell Wilson and why that was such a letdown.
Like, we thought that Pete Carroll was the issue. We thought that was why Russell Wilson was leaving. We thought that was why Drew Lock was going to start. Like, I don't think anyone really thought Drew Lock was more talented or a better quarterback.
Oh, those people
Geno
exist.
Smith.
Oh, those people
maybe
exist.
like a better raw arm strength talent where it's like, maybe he can be molded, but I don't think anyone could reasonably go Drew Lock has shown more flashes than Geno Smith up to this point in their NFL careers. They just have, but we thought that Pete Carroll, who had traded to get Drew Lock amongst other things in that trade, was going to just go for it and see what happened. And to be honest, I think they did. And it just turns out Drew Lock is just not that good. And I don't think he necessarily fights that hard to get it. And Geno Smith does and is pretty good. And so Geno Smith won. And then Geno Smith turned out to be good on a team that's still pretty talented. When push comes to shove, we thought that this team was going to be a disaster because Russell Wilson was gone. And it turned out it was actually a pretty talented team that just needed some good QB play, someone willing to commit to the system. So yeah, Geno, he may want to finally get paid like a starter that I think he believes he has been the entire time. I mean, this guy basically got punched in the jaw by a nobody wide receiver, and it ruined his NFL career. Now, granted, some could say that the fact that he got drafted by the Jets ruined his NFL career, and we're going to get into some Jets talk here in a minute, so we'll discuss how true that can be. But Geno was a highly touted draft pick. There were definitely question marks about him. I think he was arguably part of a weak QB class at that point, but we thought he was good.
He was real good at West
potential. Virginia. And then he wasn't awful for the Jets, but he gets punched in the jaw by Quincy Enunwa or whatever.
No, it was
another one.
It was I don't know. I don't remember the guy's name, but it wasn't Enunwa.
Okay, but regardless, that was it. He ended up in New York for a bit. He ended up in the Chargers, I think, for a hot second. He finally has found a home in Seattle, and I hope he is able to stay there. Who do you want to move on to next?
I picked an awful time to take a drink. Okay. I will say though, just quickly on my whole, to put a bow on the Geno Smith thing, dynasty managers, invest.
These are worse ideas.
I think it's a good vibe. There's somebody else that I also think you should invest in, perhaps more, but we're not going to get to him immediately because I do want to go both ends of the spectrum before we get into the middle. Because, actually, I will ask you this because you had mentioned that there was a guy in the Jets that you want to talk about. So, and even though not quite veteran as part of the carousel, Zach Wilson did kind of come into the year on thin ice. So, who do you think, in the grand scheme of things, had a worse go of it, considering where they are in their careers and what was at stake between Mariota and Zach Wilson?
Between Marcus Mariota and Zach Wilson?
See.
I mean,
because if you wait it,
So the tough thing is Mariota lost on his own merit, but he tried. And then Zach Wilson was just awful. He was just awful from the start. He arguably didn't try, and that's why he doesn't have a job. And instead, this team is being led by critically acclaimed showrunner of The White Lotus, Mike White. And he is a QB that could be keeping his job.
Love the segue. Love the segue. And it is interesting because, and I think we've talked about it at certain points throughout. I mean, I think, well, you mentioned it like a little bit last week, and then like probably a handful of other times. Like when Mike White's been out there. Now, granted, before he ended up getting the starting gig, for portions of last year due to, different injuries to certain people and shit, I had no idea who the fuck he was.
No, nobody did. Let's be clear. Nobody did.
But like, does he actually stand a chance to like hold this?
So I think a chance is the operative word, because I think you can say that about a lot of these guys we're going to talk about. So like Mike White is a game manager, much in the same way that Jimmy Garoppolo is a game manager. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a much better game manager than Mike White, but like Jimmy Garoppolo was more than good enough that until San Francisco was just like, we can't trust the health of this guy, and got a number 3 overall pick, they didn't replace him. And even then, they still kept him. They still found a way to keep him around. He got his starting job back for a year. Like, this is a weak quarterback class outside of the top 2, and there's arguments to be made against both of those guys. I don't think teams are going to be in a rush to draft a quarterback in the future this draft. And so if the Jets, who are a potential playoff team, don't have all that high of a draft pick, like, why not just go with Mike White and Zach Wilson into next year? Yeah. And if they get rid of Zach Wilson, like, I don't know that anyone's going to shed a tear, and they can bring someone else in to back up Mike White, possibly get like a veteran, Heck, they could bring in Jimmy Garoppolo for all we know. There's plenty of options there.
They could keep Flacco around for another shot. I mean, it's not like he's doing anything.
So, I mean, Mike White's not going to lose his job to Zach Wilson, I think. It's going to come down to, like, do the Jets see someone on the board when draft time comes around where they think they got, like, a real shot?
And with where they're picking and a lot of the rumblings that I've seen about how, NFL teams are evaluating these prospects, like, we know the top 2 quarterbacks in the class are going very early. The NFL is enamored by Will Levis, regardless of what, some, fan level evaluators have to say about him. It's true. They love him. He's going to get picked high. And then to be determined on the
do that with Zach Wilson. Like, isn't that why we're talking about this?
Look, man. Look, and here's the thing, like, so as the old saying goes, the NFL is horrible at evaluating quarterbacks.
They really are.
The only people worse at evaluating quarterbacks than the NFL are us.
This is also true.
So it's like, I mean, like, I feel pretty confident about my ability to, give a good vibe on a running back. There are other people who are good at, doing some stuff with receivers, and like the people that are really good at scouting the defensive side of the ball, like, more power to them, but like QB, bro, dude, like, I don't know. Look, like, I don't get a good vibe either, but like it is. And then also the other thing about, it's early. We're still going to have to see like pro days testing. Like if Richardson does go to a showcase game, like like the East-West Shrine Bowl or the Senior Bowl or whatever, like, at least as far as what I've seen now, there are some people that expect this dude's going to get drafted super high, because it's like, we understand this is a project, but we're going to give him the old Trey Lance treatment and just sit him, because look at those tools. So like, it does kind of muddy the waters and to your point, like, for teams like the Jets that are in this transition, but we're just good enough to like fall out of the range for these guys to be there for them. Like, they are kind of forced into these decisions where it's like, well, I guess we could just stick with what we already have, because why not? And I mean, like, moving Zach Wilson at this point probably would be a challenge. So like, I also think you're right on that front. Like, they are probably both going to be there.
Now we say that, but teams will find a way. Like, Josh Rosen was gone from the Cardinals in a year. There is precedent.
That is true. But Yeah, I don't know. He's going to be a curious case for sure. And then, like, honestly, I gotta say, I think we said everything we needed to say about Mariota because, like, he gave it his all. He was just bad. Like, that is
So
honestly what that is.
here's how I'll put it with those three guys. Geno Smith will be a starting quarterback in the NFL next year.
Mhm.
Mike White will probably not be a starter in the NFL next year, but if he is, it'll be for the Jets. And Marcus Mariota will be lucky to be in the NFL next year.
He'll probably hold a clipboard again, but I don't know that he'll ever get a shot.
I think it's complicated depending on what the fallout in Atlanta is. Because if he really abandoned the team, that is like a giant red flag for coaches.
Yeah. And for those who don't know what you are referring to, Mariota has stepped away, quote unquote. But we have
It
a little
might be
more
recouping from an injury. It might be some internal strife. It might be him telling Arthur Smith to go fuck himself and work for his daddy's company. All these are potential options, and we don't know yet.
Yeah, because, mind you, this is the second time Arthur Smith has had to bench him.
Right. It's like, honestly, though.
Oh, going back to Tennessee, he already did it.
If I'm Marcus Mariota, I'm like, bruh, you're doing it to me again.
Yeah.
You brought me here. I could have gone somewhere else, and he could have gone somewhere else.
Yeah. So until we know a little bit more about that, like, we have at least more information about Mariota's absence than we do about, kind of like we were talking about earlier with Steve Keim, the, Cardinals GM. Like, that's way more ambiguous. At least with Mariota, we kind of have a vibe. But the one guy I feel like really good about, though, Jared Goff, baby. Jared Goff. Look, here's the thing, man. And we talked about this plenty on the show this season about how Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator, there's a decent chance he might end up with some head coaching interviews with how well he's been able to do all this.
Teams look good.
Yeah. And shout out GM Brad Holmes for putting, to revamping this roster, putting a lot of, talent out there. Like, it's run so efficiently. And, I was doing some research on Goff today for something that I'm working on. And, like, he's at a 5% touchdown, percentage or whatever this year. Like, pretty good. Like, not like super like elite level MVP shit, but like you're still going to be in the top third as far as that goes. But he has not had a touchdown percentage that high since 2018 when he was with the Rams last time he made a Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
So and he had considerably more, like, again, like, well, it's, I don't even have to say no offense to the Lions, because I was about to bring up the fact that he had more talent on the Rams, but it's like that was Cooks and Robert Woods and stuff. Like, I'm not.
He's kind of a rich man's Mike White. He's a game manager, but he's a pretty good one. And
Super Bowl game manager. He didn't win, but he made it.
I think he is more likely. Again, I think like with Mike White, it's like, if he's not starting for the team he's on, I don't know if he'll start for another team. But I think he is much more likely to start for the Lions, because I think the Lions might very well end up in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I think we have seen that they're not going to rush to take a quarterback just to take a quarterback. But then B, I think Jared Goff he does have some potential. I don't think he's a full-on Geno. Like Geno Smith, if he is not on the Seahawks next year, will be a starter somewhere. I guarantee it. Jared Goff, I don't quite guarantee it. I get close, but you could see him ending up still being a backup. But it's tough. He's done the job that's asked of him. And like, if he's not in Detroit, like, does someone like Houston say no? Unless they, of course, take someone like Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, which they very well could. They probably will.
They'd be nuts not to.
Yeah, well, they're sometimes nuts. That's the beauty of the Texans.
That is true.
Panthers would be like an interesting option. We've seen them try and revive quarterbacks before. And in Goff's case, they wouldn't necessarily even have to revive him, though. They also may be willing to want to start with a new quarterback just because they're so sick and tired of having these retreads come through. But there's going to be someone who will probably take a chance on Jared Goff. If the Lions aren't that someone, I think the Lions are more likely than not to be that someone.
I think he's guaranteed to be a starter somewhere next year. I just like, He's good, man. He's good. Like,
For
obviously,
me, it's just
like,
more about how the market shakes out. Like, I'm wondering if he's not with the, because the thing would be, if the Lions draft a quarterback, is he the starter there? I think it's not necessarily no. Like, the Lions could draft Anthony Richardson and
which
then
is a
start
theory.
Jared Goff, have Richardson behind him. Richardson would become a pretty dynamic quarterback in that offense. And if he's brought up well, you've got a pretty good looking team on your hands.
And that's a pretty popular theory, especially because, mind you, lateral heads out there is an out in Jared Goff's contract after this year. But if they decide to keep him around, he is locked up for another 2 years. It's not so costly considering where they're at in their rebuild. They can afford to pay a quarterback that much money for 2 more years.
And the cap's always going to go up,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. But it's more money than you'd like to sink into it.
Given where they are in the rebuild, I think it's fine. But like I don't think it's a limb for me to say what I'm about to say, but of the potentially available quarterbacks that are going to be out there, like, and that also includes your boy Jimmy, depending on how things go with him, the most appealing quarterback out there on the market to me, if it ends up going down and they get out of his contract, is Jared Goff. That is the person that if I were looking for a quarterback and I didn't have one of those picks to get Stroud or Bryce Young, I would just say, hey, Jared Goff, why don't you come here for a couple of years, maybe 3 years, something like that, and let's work this out. Because it's like, no offense to Geno Smith, and like everything glowing we said about him is true, but like this is the 1 year we've really seen a lot of it out of him. And even though Goff did kind of have a little bit of a dip there, it started pretty strong, and it's getting pretty strong again.
Yeah.
So like this is, like he really deserves a lot more credit than I think he's getting. And he's also a guy that Superflex Dynasty managers out there, if you are already looking ahead to what you're trying to do and you're trying to get a little bit sneaky to like kind of shore up, your quarterback stuff, you're looking for your QB2, QB3, but you don't want to like go on the high end of the market because like, for a lot of those guys, especially for Superflex, we're talking firsts that you got to dispense. You know what I mean? Like Goff on the cheap, he earned himself a way onto the field. That's a pretty smart economical move from your boy Herms. So that's where I'm at with that. But it'll be interesting to see. But
so I weirdly think the guy who's more likely to hold his job, who we haven't talked about yet, is Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones isn't going anywhere. I think it's pretty clear at this point.
And for context, we are talking about the QB 13. Okay, so actually, I lied. Justin Herbert and Mike White are tied for 11th, so I guess that would be 12th. 17.1 points per game this season. We've always known the rushing is there. He hold on, here we go. I know he doesn't lead the position by so 5th in rushing among quarterbacks, 548 yards. You love to see that. And then also the QB, blah, 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 10 overall this season. And that has been without really anything that good from his receivers because, like, the Wan'Dale shit, while good, was brief because he started the year week 1, gets hurt, comes back, is good for a little bit, gets hurt again. And then Galladay's nothing. Richie James ain't much to write home about. The really good, the only tight end that was inspiring almost had his eye knocked out of his fucking skull.
And then got injured again this past week.
Yeah. And then, it was like Saquon Barkley. He's kind of the linchpin to this thing that I'm really curious about. Like, because I do think there is an interesting amount of their upside that's intertwined because how much flexibility the Giants have to go after like building weapons around the offense will be something that like I'm not super sure about. But especially if Barkley stays and they extend him, I feel infinitely better about Daniel Jones. But independent of that, I do think based off of the way that he's played, you're right. Like this is a team that, like I remember we talked about earlier in the season at that point before things started to slide and injuries, really hit them. Brian Daboll was my vote for coach of the year based on how much he was able to walk in and change things for them. And, we've never exactly been a pro Daniel Jones podcast, but we've kind of had to shut up about it this year because he's been good.
He's been perfectly fine. And I think Daboll wants to ride with him. I think that's what it ultimately comes down to. I think Brian Dable thinks he can make this team work with Daniel Jones at quarterback, and so that's who his quarterback's going to be.
I can dig that vibe,
and they can franchise tag him for $30 million next year. His fifth-year option would have been, I think, like 22 or 23. So you're paying like $8 million more.
Yeah.
Like, grand scheme of things, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because the other side of it would have been taking the option, he sucks, and then you've just wasted $23 million. It's like, what's $8 million amongst friends? I think he's a lock to be the Giants quarterback. I don't even think it's a question.
Quite literally a calculated risk that they took.
Speaking of risks, Washington takes one time and time again on a certain guy.
Had a feeling we were staying in the division. Yep.
Oh yeah. Well, this is the last guy we have on the list that you gave me. So unless we're missing anyone else, do we want to save the best for last and just get into it?
Yeah, so it's in the in memoriam section. Shout out Jacoby Brissett for your service.
God,
that was a fun time. We always enjoy the brisket tacos here at the Lateral Show. Baker Mayfield, good job for that weird ass thing you pulled out of your ass for that Rams game.
Okay, and let's talk about this real quick. Baker Mayfield is going to be the starting quarterback of the Los Angeles Rams next year.
My theory about this being a long con was only a half joke. Okay, I'm
not saying it's going to go well. I am just saying it seems likely that Matthew Stafford could retire. Yes. And if he does, I think Baker will be the starting quarterback. Yes. If he does not, Matthew Stafford will be the starting quarterback.
Absolutely. 100%.
It's that simple.
Yeah. But yeah, no, we do get. Well, also, does Andy Dalton count? Because I swear to God,
Andy Dalton never counts.
I never want to see him do this again.
God,
but
Andy Dalton shouldn't have been allowed to be a starter this much this season. He's done nothing to earn it.
The first 3 games he was they were legitimately running pretty efficiently. I will give him that. But from that point on, it has been aggressively bad. And the way Dennis Allen has handled that situation shows exactly why he never should have gotten a second chance at a head coaching job in the first place. But
let's be honest here for a second. If it wasn't for the loyalty that the Benson family, you getting that right? Benson family?
Yes. Yeah.
Shows to their guys, he would be fired after this year, you think?
I mean,
because he's kind of a holdover guy.
Maybe, but the only reason I say maybe is because there's the whispers of a certain figure possibly wanting to return to coaching.
Yeah, but I don't think he's going to return there.
You never know. You never know.
I think if he returns, he's going to want to get out of there and get to pick somewhere else.
If Sean Payton's coming back, I think what he is doing right now is hoping that the Chargers don't make the playoffs and Brandon Staley gets fired. That's what he's hoping for.
Which, if the Chargers don't make the playoffs, Brandon Staley should get fired.
And Joe Lombardi is already, especially because if they bring in Payton, they could just have Lombardi as a holdover because, I mean, a former, because Allen's from the defensive side of the ball, right? Lombardi was the offensive coordinator, kind of QB coachy guy under. Yeah, it would work, but
Allen, I think, is an offensive. Well, no, Carmichael's the offensive guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we got that right.
Yeah.
But we're burying the lead,
and the lead is
Taylor Heineke, baby. Let's go! Oh, where's my kazoo? Somehow, by hook or by crook, this man, he's out here in these streets, folks. Taylor Heineke. Man, I thought he was actually pretty good when we saw him in his audition year last year. And I understand why they did the thing that they did, because for as good as he was only that.
Well, you want to hear something wild real quick? This fun stat. Taylor Heineke is the QB 31 in weeks 1 through 14. So the season so far, 7 games played, 13.92 points per game. Would you like to know who the QB 30 is?
Is it Carson Wentz?
It is Carson Wentz with 6 games played and 17.24 points per game.
Goddamn.
This is the problem with Taylor Heineke. Like, he cares. The team loves him. He does everything he can.
The fans really like him too.
Fans love him. But man, like we talked about Emmy-nominated showrunner Mike White and his ability to run both a writer's room and an offense. But like, if you think he's a game manager, man, let me show you a game manager, because Taylor Heineke, the ceiling is just so apparent. And I just can't see them running that back.
Oh, God. The most frustrating thing about him is that it clearly works for real football.
It does. But it's almost Dilfer-esque.
It is. And like, and the reason, obviously, that it sucks for our purposes is because I want Terry McLaurin to have a better quarterback. I want Jahan Dotson to have a better quarterback.
Well, this is the best quarterback Terry McLaurin has had, because it was the Curtis Samuel show before Wentz went down.
That's true. Yeah. So and the tricky thing is, like, I feel like no matter what the front office decides to do, it's going to go terribly wrong. There's just no way it can possibly go, because as we've discussed ad nauseum in the past about the Washington Commanders, they can't have nice things. They cannot have nice things, and we know why. We know why they can't have nice things. But like, I would put it this way. I would be just as surprised, because I think it's a surprise either way, just because of how weird and ambiguous it is. I would be just as surprised to see them keep him and ride with it as I would be for them to do some crazy wackadoodle thing like bring in Matt Ryan.
So here's the one thing I will say that works in favor of Heineke. I think that they're finally sick of doing that. I think after Carson Wentz, they don't want to become the Colts, bringing in one washed-up veteran after another. Which means, like, are they going to, like, reach for a quarterback? It's not impossible. Are they going to, like, take a shot on one that falls to them? Also not impossible?
It's something Snyder would definitely want to do, but we don't know his status
right
moving forward. So, like, that does add a unique wrinkle that hasn't been around since the 90s.
So I think this is the first guy that we're like objectively not sure on. Like, all these other guys, we have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen.
I would say so, yeah.
And like Terry McLaurin, it's a true, not Terry McLaurin, Taylor Heineke is a true 50-50.
And by extension, Terry McLaurin.
Well, so here's the thing with Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin, all right. So we talked about like how Terry McLaurin, Taylor Heineke has been like the best quarterback he's had. Yeah. Real quick. So first 6 weeks of the season, what do you think Terry McLaurin's highest finish was in PPR? Weekly finish.
I remember it was very bad.
It could have been worse. Definitely below your expectations, but relative worse.
Yeah. I mean, he got enough targets that, like, I remember there was one game where it was fairly respectable. Like, I think he finished somewhere in the 40s.
Oh, no. So his best finish, weeks 1 through 6, was wide receiver 24.
You said through 6. Okay. For some reason, I was thinking 6. Okay, yeah. Gotcha.
So the Carson Wentz weeks.
Yes.
He did have some bad weeks. He finished wide receiver 82 in week 4, wide receiver 45 in week 6.
Yeah.
Do you want to know how many top 12 finishes he's had since then?
I do want to know, because honestly, I haven't really kept track of it. I am curious.
3. He had 1 top 24 finish in the first 6 weeks of the season. Since then, he has had a wide receiver 11 finish, a wide receiver 10 finish, and just the last game before their bye week this past week, a wide receiver 7 finish. He has had 3 top 12 finishes with Taylor Heinicke because Taylor Heinicke can only throw the ball to Terry McLaurin or a running back.
That is wild.
It is insane. And to put it in perspective here, targets for Terry McLaurin, weeks 1 through 6, 4, 8, 9, 6, 6, 4. Weeks 7 through 13, 8, 8, 9, 11, 7, 6, 12. Like, just a massive difference in targets.
Because they had a pretty good rapport last year. So
they did.
Yeah. Shit. Damn. Man, if I had the foresight to know that Taylor Heinicke was eventually going to work his way into this, because like I remember like on because like being part of the the ECR at Fantasy Pros, like they'll send you out certain things that you can participate. Like I did like my sleeper picks, like the results will come out at the end of the year. I did some other things. They asked for my input about my biggest my bust candidate at each position, and like Terry McLaurin without a thought was the guy that I picked because I was just like, this isn't going to go well with Carson Wentz. But if I had known, damn, I definitely would have gone with something else. But like, shit, bro, I'm going to be so interested in this. Like, especially because I'm not sure. I don't know where I stand when it comes to Heinicke. Like, I'm not pro or against. I'm more in camp I'm amused by.
It's a great story. He's not a starting caliber quarterback.
No. But like we both agreed on, that everyone just loves him to the point where it doesn't seem to matter. It's like, okay, sure, fine.
And like, again, they've tried. They like bring in Alex Smith. They bring in Carson Wentz. They bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick. And like in that time, their playoff performances are going to be like 2 games with Taylor Heinicke.
And all roads point back to Taylor. That's just it.
Well, on that bombshell, should we call it a week?
We really should. Yes. As fun as it would be to continue to look forward to 2023, we still have to look forward to the rest of the fantasy playoffs, and we have to look forward to going to bed because by the time that we will stop recording this, it is nap time. But before we send you out, just as a reminder, my name is Herms. This is the Lateral Show, a sideways look at fantasy football. And you can find me on Twitter at Herms NFL. You can find all of my work that I do everywhere over at draftsharks.com. I am the baby shark. I'm the youngest person over there doing the thing with the whatnot. But just because I left my post at Fantasy Six-Pack does not mean that I have any ill will toward the things that they do. So if you want to continue to support our friends at Fantasy Six-Pack when it comes to the DFS tools, award-winning rankings, access to the Discord community, and so much more, you can sign up for an all-access plan, fantasysixpack.net/plans. So, got to plug that pluggable, $100. And, yeah. The things that I have to share about the things that I'm up to and the places you can find me is a lot shorter now. And I definitely feel pretty good about that. It's not long-winded like it used to be. So, that's an A+.
There you go. Making moves. Well, as always, it's your boy McLateral, aka McLateralFF. You can find me on Twitter at McLateralFF, but you can also find me on Twitter at MacMcMillanATL. That is my main Twitter account at this point. It is where I'm starting to tweet about everything. So definitely go follow me there and check out the work I'm doing over at Tom's Guide, dropping a couple articles a day on the latest in tech, gaming, entertainment, news. But I do still have 2 heat check articles left for Fantasy Six-Pack. You'll get one this week for week 15. You'll get one next week for week 16. And that will probably wrap up the season for me as I go on my honeymoon to end the year. So, yeah, that's about it. That's what I got.
Well, there you go, folks. We will be back next week to talk about something because the games that we would talk about. Haven't happened yet, therefore we don't know. But here's the outro. It's the Lateral Show. Ha!
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Lateral Show. Fasten your seatbelts, because here we go.